On Christmas morning, my daughter called from the kitchen where she was making coffee, and her husband walked into the living room and sat down across from me and said, "Dad, is the 3,000 my wife deposits into your account every month covering your prescriptions okay? We've been worried it might not be enough." I set down my coffee mug. I set it down slowly, the way you learn to move when you've spent 34 years as a county sheriff, and you know that fast movements startle people into saying things they'll regret. "What deposits?" I said. My son-in-law's face did something complicated. His mouth opened and then closed, and that's when my daughter walked in from the kitchen carrying 2 mugs and a plate of the gingerbread she'd made the night before. And she looked at her husband's face and then at mine, and she said, "What's wrong?" I want to tell this story the right way, because I spent a long time trying to figure out how to tell it at all. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm 68 years old. I live in a 2-bedroom house in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, that I paid off in 2009, and I have a heart condition that requires medication I cannot afford on my pension alone. My wife, Greta, passed away 4 years ago from pancreatic cancer. We were married 31 years. She was the one who handled the finances, the one who remembered birthdays, the one who kept the address book updated and the pantry stocked and the oil changed in the car. When she died, I had to learn all of those things for the first time. At 64, I was not good at it. My daughter is my only child. She married her husband 6 years ago in a small ceremony in the Poconos, just family and a few close friends. He works in commercial real estate in Philadelphia. He is not a bad man. I want to be clear about that from the beginning, because this story is not about him being a bad man. It is about what happens when a bad woman operates in the space between a husband and his family, and nobody looks closely enough to see it. My daughter's mother-in-law moved in with me 14 months before that Christmas morning. Her name was Vera. I will call her that because it was her name, and because I am 68 years old, and I am past the age of softening things with euphemisms. She was 63, recently divorced from her second husband, and my son-in-law came to me in October of the year before that Christmas and said his mother needed somewhere to stay while she got back on her feet. "Just a few months," he said. "She's been through a lot. You have the extra room." I had the extra room. It had been Greta's sewing room, and then it sat empty for 3 years because I couldn't decide what to do with it. I said yes. I said it was fine. I did not think carefully enough about what I was agreeing to. The first month, Vera was pleasant enough. She cooked dinner twice a week. Real cooking, roasts and casseroles, the kind of food Greta used to make. She asked about my medication schedule and drove me to a cardiology appointment when my car was in the shop. I thought maybe it would be all right. By the third month, she had rearranged my kitchen. She didn't ask. I came downstairs one morning, and the cabinet where I kept my coffee and my medication was reorganized. Everything moved to accommodate what she called a more logical flow. My medication was in the cabinet above the refrigerator, which required me to step on a stool to reach it. I moved it back. The next week, it was in the same place again. I said something to my daughter about it. She said, "Dad, she's just trying to help. Can you try to be patient?" I tried to be patient. Vera had opinions about my housekeeping, about my diet, about the way I drove. She said things in the smooth tone of someone who believes they are being helpful when they are in fact being cruel. She told me my carpet smelled. She told me my doctor was too far away and I should switch to someone closer. She told me the neighborhood had changed. And didn't I think about moving somewhere more manageable? One of those communities, just me, no house to maintain. "This is my house," I told her once. "I raised my daughter here." "Well," she said, "things change." I want to be fair. I was not easy to live with in those months. I was still learning to live alone, still catching myself reaching for Greta's hand when I sat down to watch the evening news, still buying 2 of everything at the grocery store and throwing half of it away. I was not a cheerful housemate, but I was not confused. I need to be clear about that because Vera worked very hard later to suggest otherwise. At that Christmas dinner, after my son-in-law said what he said, after my daughter came in with the coffee and the gingerbread, after the 3 of us sat there in silence for a moment while the television played a Christmas movie in the background with the sound low, I said it again, clearly, to my son-in-law directly. I have never received a deposit from you. Not once. He pulled out his phone. His hands were steady, but his color had changed. He scrolled for a moment, and then he turned the screen toward me. I put on my reading glasses. There were transactions listed, month after month, labeled Raymond Calloway Medical Support. 36 of them. 36 of them. $3,000 each. My name is not Raymond Calloway, but Raymond was Greta's maiden name, and Calloway was my father's mother's surname, and together they were the name my son-in-law had given the account when he set it up, because Vera had told him that was what I preferred for tax documentation purposes. I had never heard of this account in my life. $108,000. That was what he had been sending over 3 years, believing it was going to me. That was what I calculated, standing up slowly from my armchair and walking to my bedroom to get the folder I kept my financial records in. I could hear them in the living room, my daughter's voice low and tight, my son-in-law saying something I couldn't make out. I brought the folder back. I spread my bank statements on the coffee table. My pension, $1,200 a month. My Social Security, $940. A quarterly dividend from a small investment Greta had set up that paid roughly $260 every 3 months. That was everything. That had always been everything. My son-in-law looked at those statements for a long time. He had set up a trust account, he told me. Vera had suggested it. She'd said I was too proud to accept money directly, that I'd refuse it, but that I needed it, and he shouldn't stop just because I might protest. She'd offered to manage it for me. She was already living in my house, already familiar with my situation, already, as she put it, acting as a kind of informal caregiver. She had sole management authority over the account. I had never signed anything. I had never even known to ask. Vera was upstairs when all of this happened. She came down around noon when my daughter went up to get her, and she walked into the living room in her good cardigan, the burgundy one she wore for church, and she looked at the bank statements spread across my table, and she said, "Oh, Porter, you know we've discussed this." My name is not Porter. I don't know why she said that. I think she was rattled. "Vera," my son-in-law said. He had his quiet voice on, the one I recognized from when he was working hard to stay calm. "I need you to explain the account." The account, she said, was a medical trust. The money was invested, growing, available for major expenses when I needed it. She was managing it responsibly. There were statements, she could get them. They were in her files. "Where are the statements?" my son-in-law said. She would need to find them, she said. She hadn't brought them downstairs. "When did I last receive a statement?" I asked. Her eyes moved to mine and then away. She was 63 years old, and she had the look of someone calculating the distance to the exit. "You're both being very unfair," she said finally, and her voice had gone tight. "I've been caring for him. I've been here. I manage everything, the appointments and the shopping and the medications. Do you know what that's worth? Do you think that's nothing?" My son-in-law stood up. He was 38 years old, and he worked with contracts every day, and I watched him become, in that moment, the man I'd always believed he was underneath the politeness. He said very quietly, "Where is the money?" And Vera said she didn't have to be spoken to that way in front of the whole family. And my daughter said, "This is his house, Mom." And the room went so quiet I could hear the Christmas movie still going on the television, someone laughing at something on the screen. I said, "All of you go to a hotel tonight. Come back tomorrow and we'll talk about what happens next." Vera said she wasn't going anywhere. She lived here. I looked at her directly. "Vera, this is my house. I am asking you to leave for the night." She grabbed her phone. She called my son-in-law a traitor. She called my daughter ungrateful. She said I was a confused old man who would be found on the floor someday, and no one would care. She took her coat and her keys, and she walked out the front door and got in her car and sat in my driveway for 45 minutes before she finally backed out and left. My daughter tried to stay. I told her to go to the hotel with her husband. I told her I needed to think. I sat alone in my living room that night, after the Christmas lights outside the window went quiet and the street emptied out and the neighbors' houses went dark one by one. I was a county sheriff for 34 years. I ran a department of 160 people. I investigated fraud cases, financial crimes, domestic situations, all of it. I knew how to build a case. I got out a legal pad and I started writing. My daughter called the next morning and told me her husband had been up all night going through records. He'd found the account documentation, the trust paperwork, Vera's signature on the management authorization, everything. He'd found something else, too. A document in Vera's files, a quitclaim deed for my property with my signature already filled in. I had not signed a quitclaim deed. I had not signed anything. My son-in-law photographed the document. He sent it to me. I looked at the signature line for a long time. It was a reasonable attempt at my handwriting, not good enough to fool anyone who knew me, but good enough to fool a notary who saw 1,000 documents a month and wasn't looking closely. I took photographs of the document on my screen. I wrote down the date, the notary seal information, the county where it had been filed. I added it to the legal pad. Then I called my neighbor across the street, a woman named Bet, who had been Greta's friend for 20 years, and had brought me a casserole every week for the first 6 months after Greta died. I asked Bet if I could borrow her computer to print some things, because my printer had been broken since September. She said, "Come over any time." She asked if I was all right. I said I was working on something. I printed every bank statement I had, 3 years' worth, and spread them across my dining room table with a legal pad and a box of highlighters, yellow for pension deposits, green for Social Security, pink for the quarterly dividend. I was looking for anything I might have missed, any deposit that didn't belong, any account I didn't recognize. There was nothing. Clean records, nothing unusual. The same modest income month after month, while somewhere else $108,000 moved through an account in my name that I had never touched. My son-in-law called that afternoon. He'd spoken to his bank. They confirmed what I already knew. The account was established in my name, but structured so that I had no access or notification rights. Vera was the sole authorized manager. She had been making regular withdrawals. He didn't know yet what the withdrawals had been spent on. That would take longer. Vera came back the day after Christmas. She knocked at my door at 10 in the morning, alone, and when I opened it, she was wearing her church cardigan again, and she had a manila folder in her hand that she said contained all the account documentation. I opened the door. I let her in. I did not make coffee. She laid the folder on the kitchen table. Inside was a printout of account balances, no individual transactions, and a handwritten letter she'd apparently composed that morning, explaining that the trust had been established for my long-term care, that the funds were being responsibly stewarded, that she had been supplementing my medical expenses out of pocket from her own savings while the trust grew. I said, "Show me the transaction history." She said it was a trust account, and the documents were handled by a trust administrator, and she would need to request them. I said I would like the name and contact information of the trust administrator. She said she'd have to find it. I had been a sheriff for 34 years. I knew what it looked like when someone was buying time. I had an appointment the following week with a legal aid attorney named Decker Oaks, recommended by a colleague from my department who had retired the year before I did. Decker was 55, rumpled, sharp, operating out of an office on State Street that smelled like old carpet and photocopier toner. He looked at the documents I'd brought, the bank statements, the photographs of the trust paperwork, the quitclaim deed my son-in-law had found, and he didn't say anything for a long time. "You documented this yourself?" he finally asked. 34 years in law enforcement, I said. You learned to build a file. He wanted to take the case. His firm had a contingency arrangement for compelling fraud situations. 30% of any judgment, plus I'd cover court filing costs. $400 up front, which was money I had because I had not spent my Christmas grocery budget on the Christmas dinner Vera had announced she was cooking, and then not cooked because she'd been in her room on her phone all afternoon. I wrote the check. My hand didn't hesitate. My son-in-law spent 2 weeks pulling financial records with the help of his company's forensic accounting contact, a woman named Iris who specialized in estate fraud. The picture that emerged was not complicated. It was just ugly. Vera had been withdrawing from the account in amounts that varied enough to avoid automatic flags. $1,200 here, $1,800 there, sometimes $2,500, Once a single withdrawal of $6,000 right before Christmas the previous year. The total was $102,000 over 34 months. $6,000 remained in the account. The withdrawals corresponded to charges on Vera's personal credit card, spa treatments in Scottsdale, Arizona, where her college roommate lived, a wardrobe of clothes from a department store in Philadelphia that my son-in-law confirmed he'd never seen her wear in his presence, dental work, elective, cosmetic, a weekend trip to New York in March, charges at restaurants I'd never heard of, in neighborhoods I'd never visited. Not $1 had gone to a pharmacy. Not $1 had gone to any medical provider with my name attached to it. My cardiac specialist's office, when my son-in-law called and asked, confirmed that all my outstanding balances were unpaid and had been sent to collections the previous fall. I had not known that. I had been too embarrassed to open the collections letters when they came. I'd put them in a drawer. I opened the drawer. When Decker filed the civil complaint in February, Vera hired an attorney. I found out because she came to my door 3 days later and told me I was going to regret this, and that I had no idea who I was dealing with. Vera, I said, I ran a department of 160 people for 18 years. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. She left. She did not come back to the house after that. Her belongings were still in the guest room. Her attorney sent a counterfiling in March. It described me as an elderly man with documented cognitive decline who had become confused about normal family financial management. It included an affidavit from Vera stating that I frequently forgot conversations, misplaced important documents, and had on multiple occasions asked her the same question twice in the same hour. I went to my physician, Dr. Bear, Anselm Beauregard, who had treated me for 11 years, administered a full cognitive evaluation. He said afterward that my scores were strong across every category, that my memory was clinically sound, and that he would be happy to provide a detailed written assessment for any proceeding that required it. I brought that assessment to Decker's office the same afternoon. He read it and said, "She made a mistake choosing that strategy." The forensic accounting report was 41 pages. Decker's paralegal printed it at the office, and I read it straight through at the conference table, while Decker took phone calls. Every transaction documented, every withdrawal mapped to a corresponding purchase, the full timeline laid out so clearly that even someone who had never seen a financial document could follow it. $102,000, 0 medical expenses, complete and systematic misappropriation of funds designated for another person's care. Vera's attorney requested a settlement conference in April. Her offer was $40,000 and a signed agreement that I would make no further claims. Decker said it was an opening position and we could counteroffer. I told him we weren't settling. He looked at me over his reading glasses. "You're confident?" I thought about Greta. I thought about the drawer full of collections letters. I thought about the cardiology bill I'd been paying in $40 monthly installments for 2 years. "I'm not interested in a number," I said. "I'm interested in a judgment." The civil trial was scheduled for late May. Before it began, 2 things happened. The first was that my son-in-law's brother, who lived in Ohio and had nothing to do with any of this, called my son-in-law to tell him that Vera had been asking questions about whether my house was in my name alone or jointly held. She'd apparently called him to ask casually. Family conversation in February, right after Decker filed the complaint. The second was that the notary who'd signed the quitclaim deed agreed to speak with Decker's investigator. She had no memory of witnessing my signature. The signature date on the document was a Tuesday. My pharmacy records showed I had picked up a prescription that Tuesday afternoon, which meant I had been 15 miles away from the notary's office when the document was supposedly signed. Decker said that second piece was what he would have called, in a different context, a gift. The trial lasted 2 days. Vera testified. She was composed. She was sympathetic. She wore a simple blouse and no jewelry. She spoke about her desire to protect me from financial stress, her concern for my health, the difficulty of managing complex financial documents for an aging parent. Decker asked her, under cross, to explain a $600 charge at a hotel spa in Scottsdale, Arizona, dated March 14th of the previous year. He asked her to explain an $1,800 charge at a department store in Philadelphia, dated the same week as a $3,000 trust withdrawal. He asked her to name one pharmacy, one physician, one medical service provider who had received any payment from the trust account. The silence after that last question lasted long enough that the judge looked up from his notes. Her attorney objected. The judge overruled it. "I don't have those records with me," Vera said. Decker said, "The records we subpoenaed show no such payments were ever made." She said the records might be incomplete. He said, "Mrs. Vera, $102,000 passed through this account over 34 months. Can you identify a single medical expense?" She said she managed many things and couldn't be expected to recall every detail. The judge's expression didn't change, but his pen stopped moving. I testified in the afternoon. I sat straight in the witness chair, and I answered every question clearly, and I did not look at Vera. I answered questions about my medication costs, about the collections letters, about the Tuesday I'd picked up my prescription while someone signed a deed in my name 15 miles away. I handed Decker's questions back to him like tools, clean and precise, the way I'd learned to testify in 34 years of court appearances. When it was over, my son-in-law drove me home, and my daughter made dinner, real dinner, the chicken dish she learned from Greta, and we sat at my dining room table in the house I paid off in 2009, and we ate it. The ruling came in June. I was in my backyard when Decker called. I'd been trying to fix the latch on the garden gate that had been broken since October. Full judgment, he said, $102,000 principal, $16,000 in interest, $8,000 in court costs, total $126,000. I held the phone and looked at the garden gate. The counterclaim for emotional distress was dismissed with prejudice. The quitclaim deed was voided by court order, and a finding of fraudulent execution was entered in the county record. Vera's name was removed from every document she'd ever attached it to in connection with me or my property. Decker filed for enforcement the next week. Vera had approximately $60,000 in a personal savings account that was frozen immediately. The rest came from the liquidation of a car she'd purchased the previous year, a lease she'd been paying for with trust fund withdrawals, and a jewelry collection her attorney inventoried at the court's request. The full judgment was satisfied by September. My daughter told me in August, carefully, the way she tells me difficult things, that Vera had moved to her sister's house in rural Virginia, that she was not speaking to my son-in-law, that she was not speaking to many people. I said that was between them, and I meant it. I was not interested in her situation. I was interested in mine. In September, I hired a plumber to fix the bathroom sink that had been draining slowly for 2 years. I hired an electrician to look at the outlet in the garage. I bought a new printer, a simple one, and set it up on the desk in what used to be Greta's sewing room, and is now the room where I do paperwork at a clean desk with my financial records filed in labeled folders and my medical bills paid current. I found an estate planning attorney named William Forsander who specialized in protecting assets for retirees. We set up a trust for the house. We updated my will. I established a small education account for my granddaughter, my son-in-law's brother's daughter who is 4 years old and has never met Vera, and with any luck, never will. The guest room sits empty. I have not decided what to do with it. Greta used to say every room was waiting for the right purpose. I think about that sometimes. My son-in-law came by himself in October, without my daughter, which told me it was something he'd been working up to. He sat at my kitchen table and drank the coffee I made, and he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Dad, I should have verified. I should have called you directly. I should have asked you every single month if you were receiving the money." I looked at him. He is 38 years old, and he works hard, and he trusted his mother the way a person is supposed to trust their parents, and that trust was exploited in the most ordinary and devastating way, which is the kind of thing that doesn't stop hurting just because you understand it. "You trusted someone you were supposed to trust," I said. "When you found out the truth, you stood next to me. That's what matters." He nodded. He drank his coffee. We watched the backyard through the kitchen window for a while. The garden gate latch I fixed in June still works. I check it sometimes when I come in from the yard, just to confirm it's holding. It's a small thing, but it satisfies something in me that I can't entirely name. Maybe it's just the satisfaction of fixing what's broken when you have the time and the tools and nobody is telling you it can't be done. I live in my house. My bills are paid. My medication is in the cabinet above the kitchen counter exactly where I put it, and nobody moves it. I'm 68 years old, and I've learned some things late that I wish I'd known earlier, and some things early that turned out to matter more than I expected. And the one that matters most, I think, is this: a paper trail doesn't lie. Build one whenever you can. Keep your records clean. Know what's yours. The rest tends to follow.